I want to talk a little bit about Mount Sinai, because this week's portion is the discussion of, for the first time, it's recorded that Moshe goes to Mount Sinai. And of course, we know that, I know I was at Mount Sinai. I know it was one of the most incredible experiences of my life, going to that mountain and being there and knowing that this is the place where Moshe received the Torah. But this is Mount Sinai is special for so many reasons. There are two figures in the Bible who communed with God there. There's Moses, and also the other one. Anybody know who it is? Who's the only one to go to Mount Sinai after Moses? Who's the only one who goes to Mount Sinai? Anybody know? Uh, anybody? I'll give you a second to guess. Anybody want to guess? And if you go to Mount Sinai, you would know because there is his cave there. You could do a 6 hour hike today up the mountain, and you could get to Mount Sinai. You could get to this cave. Who is this cave? This is the cave of Elijah. Elijah goes up to Mount Sinai, and it's not a hike; it's climbing. I didn't do it. You had to be an experienced mountain climber, so I didn't climb up. So Elijah goes to Mount Sinai, and he hears God in not in the fire, but in the soft, still voice, which is very interesting because Moses, when he goes to Mount Sinai, he sees God in the fire. He sees the burning bush. He sees God spoke to him from the fire. It says that in Deuteronomy, God spoke to Moses from the fire. God spoke from the fire. But when Elijah goes back to Mount Sinai years later, then we're told that God was found not in the earthquake, not in the hurricane, but in this soft, still voice. So all this was on Mount Sinai. But the question is, why was Mount Sinai selected? Why was Mount Sinai selected? So I want to share with you something, a radical interpretation I saw. But first, I'll put it out to you. Anybody want to make a suggestion? Why was Mount Sinai selected to be the mountain that the Torah was given on? And so the answer, anybody want to suggest why specifically Mount Sinai? There's so many questions. There's so many ways you could answer that question. One is that, why not Mount Moriah, where the Torah, where the temple was built? Why not a different mountain in Canaan? Why Mount Sinai? So I think the answer actually lies in a commentary by Rashi on the parsha, and then a comment by Rabbi Soloveitchik on this Rashi. So first of all, it says Moshe. It says in chapter 3, verse 1, Moshe Yaroes Son Yisrael. Moshe was shepherding the flock of Yisrael. I want to pause for a moment and say this is a tremendous tangent, but the shepherd in the Talmud is a very, very difficult job. The Talmud does not like the shepherd because the shepherd was somebody who typically would steal because he would graze his flocks on other people's grass. And so therefore the shepherd was somebody who was a shepherd. We're studying in the Talmud now was not kosher to be a witness or a judge because he's a thief. But Moshe was shepherding his flock, and Rashi says it says in the verse, he led the sheep achar hamidbar, and Rashi reads far into the wilderness. That's how Rashi reads it. And why? To distance himself from theft, because Moshe did not want to graze in the fields of others. So he read it. So he led the sheep. Moshe Yaroeh et Son Yitro. He was shepherding the flock of Yisro, his father-in-law. Vayinhagat Son achara midbar, and he led the sheep grazing far into the wilderness. And he came to the mountain of God, which was Horeva. He came to the mountain of God, which was Horeva. And the Midrash says that there are 6 names for Mount Sinai. 6 names for Mount Sinai. What are the 6 names? The mountain of God, Har Elohim, the Mount Bashan, Har Gavnunim, and also in Psalm 68. Another one in Psalm 68 is Har Hamad. And now here, Har Chorev, which is also the way it's referred to with Elijah. And then Har Sinai, which is how it's called at the Ten Commandments. So Moshe came to the mountain of God to Chorev. Now, Rabbi Soloveitchik has a commentary on this, which is very, very, very important in my mind. And he talks about this because we have a couple of problems with this text. We're never really told why Moshe was selected. We're never really told why Mount Sinai was selected. And so Rabbi Soloveitchik says the following. He says, the phrase Moshe Hayaroem, Moshe was a shepherd, that's what the text technically means, that Moshe was a shepherd, but Rashi reads it in a grammatical form known as a participle, meaning to say, not he was a shepherd, which would be Moshe Ra'ah, but as an ongoing phrase, meaning Moshe was shepherding, meaning to say that Moshe, during the silent years of Moshe, from when he ran away to Midian, which is universally accepted to be northern Saudi Arabia today, and from when he ran away towards Midian, he had a profession. His profession was shepherding. He was shepherding the flock of his father-in-law Yisro. If you go to northern Saudi Arabia today, they're building a huge museum for Yisro. He's a huge figure in that area. We saw the well of that Moshe met Tzipporah. That well is there. It's a giant well. And okay, so this is an ongoing activity. In contrast, says Rabbi Soloveitchik, the next phrase, Vayinahag et hatzon achar hamidbar, he led the sheep after the wilderness, seems to be in the past tense. Now, Moshe hayaroeh, Moshe was shepherding. That's the participle. Moses is an ongoing occupation of shepherding, and he had led the sheep. He had led the sheep in the past. So that's how we would have read it, that he led the sheep. But Rashi says, no, we should see it as a continuation of the participle, meaning to say Moshe was shepherding, and as part of his shepherding, he always made sure to lead his sheep into the wilderness so as not to graze them in other people's property, because that would be stealing. But then, meaning to say in the wilderness, there are no property rights and everyone was allowed to graze there. But then we come to the third phrase, and he came to the mountain of God at Horeb, which is he came to Mount Sinai. So it says Rabbi Soloveitchik, if the first two phrases are participles, the third phrase must also be interpreted that way to remain consistent. Meaning to say, Moshe had an ongoing profession of shepherding the sheep, and he was ongoing in a continuous manner, leading the sheep into the wilderness, and also so as not to steal from other people, and also as an ongoing activity, Moses was always going to Mount Horeb. Moses had an ongoing relationship where he would go to Mount Sinai, and he would always go there, meaning to say Moshe would leave his sheep with some of his assistant shepherds to watch the sheep, whereas Moses would then continue on his own on an ongoing basis, on a regular basis, to Mount Sinai. Well, what was Moshe doing at Mount Sinai? Says Rabbi Soloveitchik, what was this purpose of this lonely journey? Meaning to say, he had the sheep, he led the sheep into the wilderness, and then Moses alone went by himself to Mount Horeb. And this was an ongoing activity. What's the purpose of this lonely journey? What's the purpose? What did Moses do at this mountain? He prayed for his people, says Rabbi Soloveitchik, for his brothers whom he left when he had fled from Egypt. Moshe had lost faith that his brothers should rise. Moses had lost faith in his brothers. They were not worthy of freedom. Moshe likely prayed that his brothers should rise spiritually and psychologically, develop a sense of dignity, no longer be informers who spy on their own brethren. But Moshe had not received an answer until now. Rabbi Soloveitchik creates a portrait. I have not seen this in any other character. I have not seen this in any other commentary until Rabbi Soloveitchik, but it rings true to me that Moshe used to go to this mountain to be a place where he would pray, and he would be praying in this place for his brothers to remember their purpose, their mission in life. Remember their purpose and their mission in life. And that's why, and so now we see why this mountain was selected. Why did Moshe lead the Bnei Israel back to Mount Sinai? He led them back to Mount Sinai because that's the place. That was his synagogue, so to speak. That's where he had prayed for the Jewish people for many, many years. He knew that mountain well. He knew that mountain. That was his place. That was the place where he had communed with God. And so therefore he took the children of Israel back to that place so that he could commune with God again and receive the Torah. He had been praying in this place many, many times. And it was finally this time when he saw the burning bush, he was up there praying that he got the message from God. It's time for you to go back and redeem the people. God revealed himself to Moshe for the first time. It's time for you to go back. And so therefore, when Moshe wanted to get another revelation after he had led the people out, it's no surprise that he took them back to the place of the first revelation, which was the place that he had gone many, many times to pray. And so that's the idea. Why is Moshe selected? Moshe is selected because he was praying for the Jewish people for all these years. Why specifically at Mount Sinai? Because that's the place where he went to pray. That's the place where he expressed his desire to see his brothers and sisters rise up and succeed. And so therefore that's the reason why the Torah was given, why Moshe was selected, and why the Torah was given at Mount Sinai. That's to my mind, that's the creative and brilliant explanation of Rabbi Soloveitchik. Yes, we're going to pause for a second before we go into some of the Hasidic explanation. I want to make two other points here. One is from Rabbi Soloveitchik, and one is from a drasha that I heard in general. It says the angel appeared to him. Vayera melach Hashem elav b'labas eish. The angel appeared to him. Labat is really like shalhevet, like a flame of fire, mitoch hasneh, from within the burning bush. And behold, he saw the bush was burning in fire, v'hasneh einenu ukal, and the bush was not consumed. So really, the verse is not that hard to, at least the first part of the verse is not that hard to translate. The angel appeared to him, bilabas in a flame of fire. The unusual thing that, and Rabbi Soloveitchik pointed this out to me, even though I had read the Rashi, I just was over my head. I didn't pick up this point that Rabbi Soloveitchik made, but it's so obvious once you see it, that it says, bilabas eish, in a flame of fire. So Rashi says, bishal hevet eish, in a flame of fire. And then he offers an alternative explanation. What's the alternative explanation? Not in a flame of fire, but God appears to him belibo shel eish. That he takes the word, Rashi takes the word belabat, and citing the Shemos Rabbah, citing the Midrash, says it doesn't refer to the flame, but the heart of a fire. So, and Rashi proves that it's possible that that's what this word means here, in the heart of a fire. So, what is the significance of saying that God appeared to Moses in the heart of a fire? So here too we have a very powerful concept from Rabbi Soloveitchik. He says as follows. He says, first of all, he says two concepts. I'll go back to why he appeared, going back to Morris's question in a moment, but first concept is Rashi says that the phrase "belabat eish" is a heart of fire. And this is what he says. Okay, this is a little bit esoteric. You just have to bear with Rabbi Soloveitchik. It says, when the bush was shaped like a circle with a fire in the center, the fire did not spread to the periphery. So, means to say, the lave here means the center, the center. So the question Moshe was asking when he says, why is this bush not burning? He's saying, why is the bush not consumed? He's saying, and this is so much in the news about fires now, obviously, we pray for the people in California, but the question that really he was bothered by was, why is the fire remaining in the center? Why isn't it spreading? You would have expected the fire to spread. So the question Rabbi Soloveitchik says that Moshe Rabbeinu was asking is, why is the fire remaining in the center of the bush? Why is it not spreading? And that's why Rabbi Soloveitchik comes up with this very powerful answer. He gave this in Boston in 1974. He gave it 50 years ago in Boston. And this is what he said. He said, the bush symbolizes the morality of Judaism. Many times God approaches man from infinity. And from this transcendence, from basically the untouchable, unknowable, man addresses himself. God communicates with man and addresses himself to man. God can also, however, and this is the point of the burning bush, God also has the ability to contract himself, descend from the infinity and contract himself into a specific point and reveal himself to man in that manner. This is called Tzimtzum. It's a Kabbalistic idea. So he wanted to reveal himself not as the infinity, but as the ability to contract himself to make space for man. So what Rabbi Soloveitchik is saying, that Moshe had lost faith. I mean, there's a lot here. So he takes it a few different. He comes back to this point. Rabbi Soloveitchik came back to this point about the bush, the center of the bush being where God was, to being this. He comes to being the place where God is contracting himself on this world to reveal himself to Moses. He came back to this at least 4 or 5 times in his different lectures, and the one that I found the most meaningful, the point that each time he makes a different point. I'm not going to go through all the points, but here's one that I found the most meaningful. He discussed this in his essay called Majesty and Humility. He said that cosmic man, meaning to say a man who sees the overwhelming cosmos and all the galaxies, sees God in the boundlessness, the infinite cosmic drama, in the fact that the world is infinite, the stars go on forever. But homebound, origin-minded man, meaning to say, man who's just basically seeing God in the home, finds God not in the unlimited, but in the limited narrowness of finitude, in the smallness of the modest home into which man was born and to which he returned. He discovers God in the origin, in the source, in the center of the burning bush. Either infinity cannot contain God, or God, if he so wills it, addresses man from the dimensionlessness of a point, from the center of a burning bush, if not a point. So basically, the way I understand what Rabbi Soloveitchik is saying is that there's 2 ways in which God can address man, either from the infinite, from the transcendence, the overwhelming majesty, or else, and this is what he's teaching Moses in this essay, in this concept of the burning bush, is that God can contract himself and just appear as like a simple point in our own homes, in our source, in the dimension, and that's what he's saying, in the center of the bush. Moses is seeing a revelation of God. And now we say, why specifically a bush? Why specifically a bush? So here we have a beautiful idea that Rabbi Soloveitchik is saying that that he wants to tell us that God is relating to us in a time of crisis, meaning to say, God is saying, I too am in a bush. God is one who is called to dwell shochnei sneh. He dwells in a bush. God resides in the thorn bush. It says in the book of Job, chapter 42, shochnei sneh. So even when we're in the whirlwind, God appears. And that's why specifically, as Morris was talking about the thorns, specifically, God is appearing to Moses in the bush to teach this idea both of the God who's relatable, not the God who's transcendent, and also the idea that in the darkest of times, that's where we can expect God to also appear to us in that manner. But God is not only there in the physical distress, but also in the spiritual distress. These are some of the ideas that Rabbi Soloveitchik says about that. Okay, so hold on one second. I just want to say, before we take Morris's question, I see that Rabbi Soloveitchik also refers to, and God saw that Moshe had turned to see, which was a phrase we were discussing. But he says, when God sees how Moses responded to the sight of the bush, he removes the angel and he appears to Moses. Meaning, first it was the angel who appeared, but God saw that Moses had turned aside to see the bush, and God says, okay, now it's appropriate for me to reveal myself. So at first it was the angel in the bush, and then it became God. Once Moses reacted to the bush appropriately, the Jews came under the supervision and protection, not of an angel, but of God himself. So it doesn't say that the bush was burning forever, but it does say that, unlike before, where we saw the Midrash say that God responded to Moses responding to the plight of the Jewish people. Rabbi Soloveitchik is saying God is responding to Moses noticing the bush. But it doesn't say, at least Rabbi Soloveitchik, that the bush was burning forever. Just saying that once God saw that Moses noticed the bush, he revealed himself to Moses directly and not through an angel. And that's very close to what Bruce was saying, but we're still haven't found that ancient midrash. Yes, Morris.
Yeah.
It's been pointed out by many, and it says that God called him from the bush, and he said, Moses, Moses. Moses said, here I am. And then he says, don't come closer, remove your shoes, because the place that you're standing on is holy ground. So the question the commentaries ask is, well, he should have told Moshe that before he came to that spot. If it's holy ground, he should have removed the shoes before he came to the holy ground, not once he was standing on the holy ground. Like, for example, the Temple Mount, you don't go up on the Temple Mount and then remove your shoes as a sign of respect. You remove your shoes before you go on the Temple Mount, and then you could go on the Temple Mount. So he should have said to Moses, before you come closer, remove your shoes. But no, he doesn't say that. So what's going on here? Says the place you're standing on is holy ground. So he says, remove your shoes, the place you're standing on is holy ground. There's a lot to talk about this concept of removing the shoes. And we'll talk about it in a moment. But first, I want to point out that he says, why the ground was not holy before. And the ground actually is not holy since. And Mount Sinai, unlike Mount Moriah, which anybody could go to, Mount Moriah, there's very severe restrictions on how you can go. There's large sections of the Jewish community, probably the majority still, that will not go up on Mount Moriah today because it's still holy. From Mount Sinai, anyone could go. It has no holiness today. It is not considered holy ground. The second that the holiness, the second that the Shekhinah departed, it lost holiness. So this place, why is it being called holy ground? Because only after Moshe says, Hineni, here I am, that transformed it into a holy place. It wasn't holy before. It was only holy once he responded and said, here I am. Now God says, okay, now that you've recognized your mission, you've recognized Hineni, now we are going to say that this place you're standing on, it's holy ground. So that's the idea that Moshe made that ground holy. And after Moshe left, it no longer retained its holiness. It no longer retained its holiness. That's one of the ideas of that phrase, saying it's holy ground. I want to just see, I'll just share with you a couple of Hasidic insights into this idea of remove your shoes. Hold on one second. Hold on. Okay, he says, do not come closer because the place you're standing is holy. Remove your shoes. So so let's first go to the Ropshitzer. Ropshitzer is a student of Rabbi Melech. The Ropshitzer says as follows: remove your shoes. The word Na'al is an acronym. It stands for Neshicha, biting, Akitza, thorns, Lechisha, enchantment. We learn that the bite of Torah scholars is the bite of a fox, and their sting is the sting of a scorpion, and their hiss is the hiss of a serpent. So Moshe shall nalecha. So God is telling Moses, remove this part from your personal repertoire. Improve yourself spiritually. So the Edus B'Yosef says, in the wilderness, this goes to what Morris was saying. In the wilderness, there are a lot of snakes, poisonous snakes and scorpions. It's very dangerous to go without shoes. And whoever walks barefoot, it's like he's putting himself in mortal danger. So therefore, when God commands Moses to remove his shoes from his legs, he says, you don't have to worry because this is holy ground. And in holy ground, there's no snake or scorpion who could do damage. Because it says in Avot that a snake or a scorpion never damaged anybody in Jerusalem. You don't have to worry here, he's saying. This is a holy ground. I'll just do one more idea from the Olos Ephraim. So he says, generally speaking, the whole place is going to be, filled with dangerous stones that will hurt you. And when you wear shoes, you're able to walk on these stones and you don't feel anything. But when you go barefoot, you feel every single thing, every single thorn, every stone hurt. This goes back to what Morris was saying. And this is the hint that Moshe, and if you want to be the leader of Israel, remove your shoes. Feel every single thorn. Feel every single hurt of the Jewish people. The leader of the generation needs to feel every single pain, in order to be the leader. Wow, what a beautiful idea from Olos Ephraim. That's why the first thing Moshe has to do when he's the leader is to remove the shoes. In order to be the leader, you have to feel the pain. What a powerful idea. I'll stop here, God willing. Okay, hold on one second.